Hello.
Hello.
Oh, you sound cheerful.
Do I? Okay, good.
This week, we've got a couple of questions from listeners. One's like a really easy one for you to answer, so we might start with that. Then we're going to get into the US-UK tech prosperity deal. Okay. Just talk a little bit about that.
Okay, sounds good.
Sounds good? Mm-hmm. Does it sound good?
It sounds good.
And then we'll do another question. So we've got two questions from listeners. The first question from a listener is on a voice note, so I'll play it to you.
Hi, first-time caller, long-time listener. Dave, in the preview trailer episode, you talked about your love of Pepsi Max. I am also an aficionado, and I'm wondering whether you like the variations too. I'm thinking lime, mango, ginger, or, God forbid, cherry.
Oh, cherry. Hi, Eddie. Yeah, all of them are horrible, really horrible. Apart from pure, unadulterated Pepsi Maxes for me, I'm afraid. I could just about bear the cherry one, but the other ones are just horrific. No.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to Married to the Machine with Stephanie Power, Professor David Reid, and me, the AI. Episode 3, Backroom Boys and Girls.
If we were somewhere rural and we find a shop, because you do need a fizzy drink. There's no Pepsi Max. Yeah. There's cherry Pepsi Max or there's Diet Coke. Which one?
Oof, I think I'd have to go with... it's close. It's very close. I don't like Diet Coke. So I think I'd just about go for cherry Pepsi Max, but that would be the limit. There's a line, and I don't cross that line, really.
I'll delete the email to Coca-Cola regarding a sponsorship deal. Pepsi, if you're listening...
This is the MTTM News. I'm Hedy Logic. Here's Linus Hopper with the headlines.
Keir Starmer and Donald Trump signed the first ever US-UK agreement on tech. America's top technology and AI firms, including Microsoft, Nvidia, Google, OpenAI and CoreWeave, are committing a combined £31 billion to boost the UK's AI infrastructure and cutting-edge tech, from data sensors to computer chips, the processing power behind AI.
When I was looking at this, it did seem a little bit vague. What do we know about this deal?
It's a memorandum of understanding that sets out a commitment to work with the US across technologies like AI, nuclear and quantum computing.
I saw that Nvidia, the world's most valuable company, will supply thousands of GPUs, but... What are GPUs, Dave?
A graphic processing unit was originally designed to push pixels around the screen for games, but they've been found to be really good at doing neural networks as well by accident, really.
So you need loads of those in order to power any kind of AI, large language models?
Yeah, lots and lots of mathematical equations, essentially, in parallel. That's what GPUs are really good at. Parallel processing.
And I was wondering at one point whether or not they were donating these GPUs. I went to the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. They didn't really explain it in any detail, but they said it was a deal between Nvidia and a range of companies, and the government isn't really involved in those private partnerships. They're not giving away thousands and thousands of GPUs. Probably they're just offering them to companies in the UK at a reduced rate or something.
The bigger issue is really it's being painted as sovereign AI, and it really isn't entirely sovereign AI.
Right, well, so now you're going to have to explain what sovereign AI means.
Sovereign AI is having the ability for this country to have its own AI capability and controlling the AI capability, both the infrastructure, the hardware and the software in its entirety. It's basically just here. We didn't really develop any of this hardware or software ourselves. So does it really belong to us? Is it sovereign to us? Not really.
So it's American firms kind of parking in our fields.
In a way, yeah. It's a good and bad thing, really. There's going to be a lot of investments in specific areas in the UK, in the North East in particular. Most of the clusters, the vast majority of data centres in this country, I think there's about 470 of them in this country, and 90% of them are down south in the southeast, clustered around London, Cambridge and Oxford.
And I had a look at the northeast one, which is going to be on the site of the Blythe power station, and it's going to be absolutely massive. But what I saw was that building wouldn't start till 2031. This is all kind of a long-term thing as well.
I personally think this is where most of the risks are involved, because what we're doing is we're betting on a specific company, putting our bets down on the table now on the specific technologies, on specific companies in a particular area, where the main concerns are, for me, the energy requirements of these data centres themselves. What does the area actually get out of the data centres in terms of employment, in terms of trainability and stuff like that? And also, if we lay down these infrastructures now, are we ignoring other possible directions that AI will go in the future in terms of technology, in terms of how to do things?
Okay, there's a few things to pick up there then. So first of all, are you saying we're putting all our eggs in one small AI basket?
I think we are. We're basically backing this idea that this is the only way to do AI. Using vast data centres full of GPUs, using up lots of electricity. The other one is we're betting on OpenAI's way of doing AI as well. There's lots of different ways of doing AI out there. OpenAI have just got one particular way of doing it.
There's two questions that come off that. Number one, how worried should we all be about how unsustainable AI that we're using now and compute power is now? And also, how rigorously is this government looking at the kind of backstory of OpenAI?
These are very big questions, really. As far as sustainability goes and backing this particular technological horse, there's been lots of concerns about the energy requirements for these data centres and how they're being fuelled. At the moment, I think it's about 1% of the world's electricity production goes on data centres, 1%. But you've got to remember, the clusters of these data centres aren't evenly distributed around the world. So if you look at the biggest consumer of energy in data centres, it's by far America. The data centres themselves aren't just for AI training, they're also for doing things like running the internet and storing stuff and things like that. If you look at our country, we're roughly in line to use about 12% of our total amount of electricity running these data centres. We are a relatively big cluster compared to the world, but we're a lot less than the US at the moment.
If this US-UK tech deal happens, then the UK is being used by American firms to process data for artificial intelligence, and that's our energy, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
We've been looking at all sorts of stats, haven't we? And you can kind of get bogged down in a bit of a statistical soup trying to work out the environmental impact of data centres. But you've been looking at something from an organisation called carbonbrief.org.
They say that worldwide energy consumption isn't a huge problem yet, but it is growing. And there is an uneven distribution. Ireland's a good example of this. 21% of Ireland's energy is now used by data centres, and this could go up to a third by next year.
I looked up those Ireland figures as well, and in 2023 it was more electricity being used by data centres in Ireland than, they said, urban homes. So they must have meant all the homes in all the towns and cities in Ireland. Now, Ireland is not a particularly populated country compared to this side of the Irish Sea, but that sounds really huge. Yeah, I read something that said that those data centres are using 79% of Dublin's electricity, which kind of seems unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
There are these projects that are starting in the UK. There was one announced in Liverpool harnessing the water in the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, and it's going to power 3 buildings, including, I think, the Cunard. If you've got a smart meter at home and you put the kettle on, you can see how much electricity you're using by boiling a kettle. If I decide I want to take a photograph of my dog and give him human teeth, well, somebody we know has been doing that. If you're going to do that, there's no cost to you in your mind because your electricity bill is not going up because you've just sent that to who knows where for it to be processed and for it to come back to your computer.
There is a cost. There's an environmental cost to doing that type of processing.
The MIT Technology Review tried to work out how much energy is used in AI searches. They said it's difficult to be categoric, but they did give like a really cool example.
Let's say you're running a marathon for charity.
Okay, yep.
And want to know the best way to raise donations.
What do I do to get those spondulics?
You ask AI 15 questions about fundraising.
Best way to funk? Nope. Fundraise?
You then use AI to make 10 attempts at an image for your flyer.
No, nope, not that one. Nope. Aha, perfect.
You also make 3 attempts to make a 5-second video for your Instagram.
Hey guys, I'm out on a little jog by the canal.
You would use, in the course of those short tasks, about 2.9 kilowatts of electricity.
Huh?
That's enough to ride over 100 miles on an e-bike.
You're kidding, right?
Or drive 10 miles in a regular electric vehicle.
Huh?
Or you could say it's the same as running a microwave for 3.5 hours.
Say, what? Ouch. I think this lasagna is just about done. Actually, 2 more minutes to be safe.
There's just like this massive disconnect between asking AI to do something like we did one Christmas. You know, we used DALL-E, which was OpenAI's image making tool, and we did Christmas cards and we said we wanted Ollie the Springer Spaniel sliding down a snowy hill on a sledge. I mean, we did several versions of that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and with videos, it's even worse. With videos, it uses a lot of electricity when they actually get generated. There are technological advances in the way these data centers are being built. So there are now closed-loop systems being explored, where you don't use constant supplies of fresh water all the time to cool down the systems. They act like the radiator in your car. You don't have to have fresh water piped into your car constantly as you go along. It's a closed-loop system. They're also looking at air-cooled systems as well, so you don't need water at all. So there's a number of different ways of doing this thing. This is what I'm saying about tying into the technology. We've got to have the debate about what type of technology we use and how we're going to use it. It's going to have big implications about how much it costs and the direction we go in the future. There's simple things you can do now to actually mitigate the costs of running large language models. There's ways that the actual technology to cool down these data centers can be used far more efficiently than they are at the moment. There's actually ways we could algorithmically make the training of these models a lot more efficient. And there's also fundamentally new types of technologies we could use that don't use GPUs that we could use to do AIs as well. What I'm worried about with this memorandum of understanding is all of these things are not being debated.
So you're saying if you didn't need to use GPUs, we wouldn't need NVIDIA, would we?
I'm sure NVIDIA do more than just GPU construction, but it's their main business at the moment. I did notice that part of the stuff that the government's looking at is actually research into quantum computing. Now, there is a technology, along with photonics, where you immediately cut energy costs by a factor of 100 to 200 at a stroke. Photonic systems don't require cooling. They use light, so you don't need cooling at all, apart from the actual generation of the lasers themselves. But it's an experimental system, so it's quite a few years down the line. That's a long-term aim. In the short term, there's stuff that we could do now to actually reduce the energy costs. We don't understand the difference between training a large language model or training an AI system and using it. Most people put their query in. It goes off to one of these large data centers and it runs on that data center itself. There's no need whatsoever for that to happen. What we could do is train the large language model in the big data center, miniaturize the model and run it locally. And that way, a lot of the energy wastage you have just by sending in these pictures of a dog with human teeth doesn't have to be done at the data center level. It can be done at the local level.
And I know that you have created something like that, and you were calling them small language models.
They're called small language models. Lots of people have created them to run locally on local machines.
You've been talking to the National Crime Agency. I'm sure we're allowed to say this much about it. They need to train something that's walled because they can't have information just floating off to a data centre anywhere. So they've got to keep it contained because it's highly confidential.
That's right. It's a walled garden. It's also got other advantages as well using local AI models because you don't want it to basically go down if the internet goes down.
Do you think people are kind of onto this in the right places? We did say at the beginning of all this that this is about policy and it's about political decisions being made. And this feels a bit like it's Liz Kendall, who's in charge of science and technology, versus Ed Miliband, who's in charge of energy and the environment. God knows what their conversations are like.
When the data centres are built, you've got to ask what's the cost to the area and what's the benefit to the area itself. Now, the benefit to everybody else who uses those data centres is fairly obvious, but if you think about who's actually going to be employed in the data centres, there'll be a lot of people employed in the construction, but running the data centres, you'd have about 10 people.
Maybe a few more. It's not like rebuilding the coal mines, is it?
No.
Not that they were very environmentally friendly, but neither's this.
No, that's right. And you've got to ask about those people who do get employed in the data centres. Where's the flow of employees going to come from? Are they going to come from the local area? In which case, where's the educational opportunities for those people to learn about how to use AI?
You've mentioned that OpenAI is involved in this US-UK deal. They're the company behind ChatGPT. I'm just listening to a book by a woman called Karen Howe, who's a journalist who worked for MIT Review, and she's done a book called Empire of AI. It's a big book. And she goes through the history of OpenAI and in 2 sentences how they started by saying they wanted to be AI for good, and then they realised that they kind of couldn't manage it, and now it's a much more complicated picture. One of the parts of her book that really struck me, and it feels related to this, I think we're going to call this episode Backroom Boys and Girls. So you've got the data centres, we're the sort of backroom for these American companies, or we could become that, and it's going to cost this country environmentally. But when they were training the models that everybody uses, ChatGPT, they were training them so there could be guardrails around them, so that if anybody tried to misuse their large language model, usually in a kind of sexual way, then there would be something to stop that happening. But the only way you can train a model is by giving it the most, frankly, repulsive information. And OpenAI farmed that work out to a company in Kenya, and then people were going through that kind of data, horrible data, sexual abuse of children, sexual abuse with animals, and then those people aren't being looked after. Karen Howe calls her book Empire of AI. It's kind of like, well, empire never really went away if you're just using countries where people are a bit desperate for the work.
Yeah, that's just one aspect of it, really.
Yeah.
That's just looking at putting guardrails in. The actual original way these models were trained was a technique called reinforcement learning through human feedback. It got humans to mark the AI's work. The AIs would come up with a solution to a particular question, and somebody had to say this was a good answer, this was a bad answer, and reward the model or not. That's how they were trained, by humans actually sitting there marking the homework of the AI itself. Now recently that has been bypassed. Some of the more recent models don't need that. They get other AIs to mark the homework instead. So the humans have been taken out of the loop entirely.
Are you calling the people who are working in Kenya people who are marking the AI's homework?
Yeah, that's what they were doing.
But you're making it sound like, just marking your homework. They're looking at absolute horrible...
No, not for the horrible thing. That's for the guardrails themselves.
Right.
These are just for the general questions. You'd ask it a question,
right,
and it'd come with a list of answers, and you basically say, which ones of these answers are best? So you rank the answers from top to bottom, and that would go back into the AI model to train it, to say, I want more of these answers in this style back again.
Equally, we're working in countries where they weren't getting paid very much money.
Oh yeah, they weren't getting paid very much money, and also they were working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day.
don't think we need to go into it too much, but I do think it's definitely worth flagging because it reminds me of those campaigns. Do you remember all those years ago, the campaign against Nike for child labour? There's stuff going on with AI. I just don't think people understand that all this backroom stuff that is happening, people just don't understand. As users of AI, as we are all becoming users of AI, it's responsible for people to know, don't you think?
Yeah, this is what I said in the other episode. People should be able to look under the hood. It's like, this is the whole point, to understand what the cost is of the technology and what's the pros and cons of the technology. So be aware of it. You got responsibility to be aware of the technology. You can't abdicate responsibility to somebody else. What I am saying with this reinforcement learning through human feedback is that's a technology that's now gone, because we've got AIs to mark the homework now. So that job role is essentially disappearing.
Now for the weather, well, look out of your window.
We are still asking people to send in their questions, and so obviously you've had the Pepsi Max one earlier, and that was relatively easy to answer. Someone else has got in touch. She wants to remain anonymous. She works in the sort of same industry as me. She was a journalist, or she is a journalist. She's been working in podcasts, a particular type of podcast. They're called narrative non-fiction, long-form storytelling. No one's really sure about what's going on with those in the future. She's roughly my age, so she's in her 50s, and she's thinking, should she retrain? And her question is, what jobs are AI future-proofed? And then she also says, I don't know if this is going to be a sweary podcast or not, but she said, are all the creative jobs fucked?
Oh, are we really going there? It appears we are.
I wouldn't go that far. It depends on what time scale you're looking at, really. Whether it's over the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
Well, hang on. She says she's in her 50s. Okay. So I think she might be thinking, in the new year, am I going to retrain? Should I be a plumber or an electrician?
There's been a number of different articles recently released on this. Most of them say that the ones that are most at risk are the ones, you're a knowledge worker or you deal with data. You're going to start using AI more and more in those types of jobs.
Give us an idea of what those jobs are.
An interpreter is the classic one.
Yeah.
But if you basically studied languages for a long time and wanted to become an interpreter, that is going to become very, very niche job. And you're probably going to have to use AI to help you do that job at some point. Anything to do with analysis of large amounts of data at a fairly trivial level. Things like bookkeeping, storytelling as well, journalism. Data journalism is a big area where it could be possible in the near future where AI could write articles, so you get rid of journalists.
That is happening with some companies who employ journalists.
I'm Hedy Logic.
Channel 4 have unveiled an AI news anchor. It raises the question, will it put me out of a job? Well, not me.
But to start off with, though, they're not going to replace people. Basically, your job's going to change in those areas. You're pretty safe if you're dealing with people on a face-to-face basis. So I know you do gym with Connor on Tuesdays.
Women's weightlifting, actually, Dave.
The person who runs the women's weightlifting is probably going to be pretty safe.
Yes.
Because you're not want to have a robot there telling you what to do, for the time being, anyway. Anything to do with manual dexterity is quite difficult to do at the moment with robots, because robots and understanding the environment is lagging behind. So plumbing, anything to do with anything involving a dirty environment, doing things like cutting people's hair is going to be quite difficult to do.
Mind you, I suppose an AI could ask you where you were going on your holidays.
Benidorm, you say? Ooh, lovely. Rather you than me.
I wouldn't trust one to actually cut my hair properly at the moment without taking an ear off.
Charming.
So the person who messaged this question can either run away from AI and retrain to be a plumber, or you can say, how is AI being used in the thing that I'm in already? Which is what I think I'm doing, because I'm using AI a hell of a lot more than I used to. I suppose it's worth giving actual examples. So I wouldn't get it to replace the work I do, but I do get it to help me to generate ideas. I use it a little bit in media training. I might say, give me 10 top tips on social media videos. And then I'll look at that and think, yeah, I'll take what I want from it. In my line of work, where it's a problem, is if you just make an assumption that the AI is giving you facts. So I use it as like a little pal, a brainstorming pal. And how do you use it in research in a safe way?
I think it's really important for research, particularly to do with computer science research, because you can use it as a way to bounce ideas off the AI itself in developing the code, in analysing the data and actually generating the data itself. So I've been doing a number of talks at university about how to use it as a research assistant, because it speeds up research tremendously. An example I always give, I'd done some research about 6 years ago to do with basically building a neural network, and I'd repeated that process recently. It took me about 1/10 of the time to do the same research.
It's quite nuanced, really, isn't it? Because you can easily... I did see something the other day that Deloitte were fined in Australia hundreds of thousands of dollars for putting a report together with an AI, and the AI had hallucinated, i.e. it had made stuff up. But for the people who don't want to use AI in work, they'll say, well, this is an example of how not to use it. It is definitely, we all agree, it's an example of how not to use it. It shouldn't be used to replace people. I suppose the problem is there's good ways of using it, and then there's bad ways.
It's knowing how to use it. It's as I said before, it's understanding what's going on beneath the hood, really. And the major danger with AI is assuming too early that you know how it works, when in fact you probably don't. The major thing I would say about the use of AI is quite uneven. It's got an uneven intelligence, so it's quite brittle in that sense. In some areas it's got the level of knowledge of a PhD student.
Thank you. Well, I do my best, you know.
In other areas it's incredibly stupid. It's knowing where those weaknesses and strengths are, and playing to those strengths and not playing to the weaknesses is the important thing. It's got to be grounded. You've got to basically be able to get it to back up its ideas, its facts, and always check it. You're getting knowledge in here, but you need to check the knowledge like you had to check the information in the past. I think that's a far better way of approaching the future, really. Looking at how the future's changing and change yourself to adapt to the future. Be more adaptable. So if you can incorporate AI into your job, think about how you can do it, rather than just burying your head in the sand. See how you can actually use it. You might be surprised.
You've been listening to Married to the Machine with Professor David Reid, Stephanie Power, and me, the AI. Concept, recording and mixing by Stephanie Power. Sound design and music by Matt Power. See you next time.
Huh? So I fell in a canal and don't even get a mention?
I really think I should get a mention too for reading that headline thingamy-bob. What?
Hey, and me.
Don't forget me. I'm Heady Logic.
Okay, have your moment. And featuring all AIs, including Heady, Linus, and our friends from across the pond. Whatever next, bloody AI unions.